welcome to episode 6 of Fast and Loose, the podcast of me, Stephanie Earp. I'm an indie knitwear designer in Montreal, and welcome to new subscribers who found me through Diana Walla. Sorry it took me so long to actually get something uploaded, but I decided to take a nice long holiday over the holiday season and come back with lots to talk about. That said, I am actually going back to an old design that I talked about before on the podcast, my sweater Galore. And I just knit a new sample of it, so I have some sort of fresh insights to the design. So this is my new sample of the Galore sweater right here. It's knit in Tanis Fiber Arts Pure Wash DK in 5 colors. It starts with Cobalt, Teal, Cosmic Night, Tartan, and then Lightning. Those are the 5 colors that I used, and I love how it came out. It definitely looks a little bit more color blocked than my original, where it shifts down into this purple at the bottom. That's the Tartan and the Lightning. Mostly the Lightning that's giving you that purple. But I super love it. I think it's great, and the color block hits at a really good spot, sort of at the natural waist, which is a nice thing to emphasize. So for those of you who don't know the story, I designed Galore about a year ago. I released it about a year ago, and I had knit it in these 5 beautiful skeins of Madeline Tosh DK that I just loved, and I brought the sweater with me to Kingston to visit my family, and then on the way home, having shown it off and worn it, I packed it in my luggage, and then my luggage was stolen from the bus. So I lost it, along with tons of other stuff. I feel like I'm still discovering things that I'm like, damn, where is that? And it was in that luggage. But obviously the real heartbreaker was losing the Galore. So I knew I was going to knit it again. It took me some time to sort of like figure out what I wanted that to be. And I'm really excited that it's finally finished. I was highly motivated by the fact that I have a trunk show this weekend. So I was like, I need to have it. It's probably my most popular design. And I didn't want to be at the trunk show and not have one. So I've been on Sleeve Island with this guy for a long time. So here is what I did differently and what I think about the pattern now that I had some time to reflect on it and I came back and knit it a second time. First of all, right away, I knew that I wanted to try a lower neckline modification. So the original neckline is quite a bit higher, maybe an inch. I mean, that doesn't seem like a lot, but when you see it here, you know, it's similar to sort of the shirt I'm wearing, this one, and maybe a little bit higher. But the original was really right up here. So a couple things that gives you. So how I did it, I'll have my notes up on Ravelry really soon, but how I did it is I basically just skipped the first increase in the sweater. So originally it says cast on X stitches and then you make an increase. So I just went ahead and cast on the amount that was for after that increase and then knit the sweater as written. So it's actually an inch shorter down here too. And that was laziness because I didn't want to recalculate. So I just was like, I can lose an inch, that'll be fine. So the other thing that happens when you skip that is that you skip sort of a pesky double increase that I have written into the beginning of the neckline. Listen, it's not unknittable, it's not even particularly difficult, but it's an unusual increase, and so I had like the instructions, the way they're written, they can be kind of hard to follow. I linked to a tutorial in it. If you want to knit the higher neckline, I'm not trying to discourage you, but certainly this was a little bit easier in the knitting by skipping that, and it has a nice neckline that sort of sits a little bit lower. If you're not someone who likes something right up here, I'd recommend that modification. So the other thing that I kind of discovered is that, you know, I think I overwrote the pattern a little bit. There's some cool information in there that I'm happy I put in, sort of a modification guide if you wanted to change the number of colors that you use. So I have like a chart that explains how to recalculate your yardage that you'll be required if you decide to change how many colors you're going to use. And then I also have some information about how to recalculate sort of how many inches to knit of each section depending on, you know, how many colors you're using so that you can get a nice even fade. That stuff's pretty cool, but I think one of the things I did when I wrote it, and it's interesting, right, because I'm like reflecting on myself as a designer a year ago versus who I am now. Not maybe as a designer, but as a pattern writer, and what information do I put in the pattern. So one of the things I did in the pattern is I wrote all your measurements from the neck. So you kind of knit a section, and that's this many inches, and then I say, you know, now knit this section until it measures this much, instead of giving you the section measurements, which when you're actually knitting is a much easier thing to measure. Smaller distances are easier to measure, easier to get them accurate, and probably easier in your brain to think about it, like, oh, these sections are all 3.5 inches long, so I just know that I'm going to do the same thing. Whereas instead of saying that, I'm constantly going from the neck. And I know why I did that is that I was thinking about people who might want to modify and thinking like, so, if you're using 3 colors instead of 5, your little sections aren't 3.5 inches, so better I give you the measurement from the neck. So that's something that I'm sort of thinking about, like if I was to find the time to go back and sort of modify this pattern, rewrite it, make it easier, would it be better to write it the way that it's easier to read and knit, or is it better to keep it the way that's easier to modify? And I think that's sort of like an interesting conundrum. So that one's not necessarily something I would change, but it's something that I realized as I was knitting it for the second time. The other thing that I found is that I wrote at the ends, at the hemline here, down here, and at the sleeve edges, over here, which you can see I haven't even woven in my ends yet, I asked you to do a couple of rows of garter, right? Because this is obviously, it's at a slip stitch with purl stitches in between. So it's almost a rib, but not really. I mean, on the reverse side, you can really see that it's sort of basically stockinette. And I was worried that it would curl. So I wrote in these couple rows of garter at the end, and I say switch to a smaller needle and garter it. The truth is, with the garter, that actually sort of pumps, it fluffs up, right? Because garter sort of sticks out. So in a way, it actually does the inverse of what I wanted to do. Yes, it doesn't curl, but now you have sort of like a ridge at the bottom of the sweater and at the bottom of the sleeves that I'm not sure you need. And I say that because on the sleeves, I didn't do it because I had that thought while I was finishing up the body, and I was like, oh, the sleeve, I'm going to see what happens if I don't do that and see if I'm happy with it. And I'm super happy with it. I did not do the garter, and I didn't even go down a needle size. I just finished up the sleeve on the same needle that I was using for everything else, but I did do quite a firm bind off. So you can see like my cuff's not very stretchy, but the cuff fits me and it fits over my hand and everything. It's not a problem. And so it sits really nicely, and it's sort of an unnecessary detail in the pattern. So this all kind of is making me think about like how have I changed as a pattern writer, what have I learned? And I think the big thing is to not necessarily do something just because you've seen it everywhere, right? Like I just sort of assumed that I would need this garter ridge, that I would need to go down smaller needles in order for the sweater to fit properly and have the nice finishing. But I didn't really test it out until I did the second sample. And I think that's like something to learn, of like really try things and see if they're necessary. I mean, my goal for sure is to write patterns that are easy to knit, fun to knit, maybe not easy, but fun, and don't ask you to do things that you don't need to do. So I think that's something that I've learned a little bit, and I think my more recent patterns are a little bit more straightforward, and I think a huge part of that comes from finding a really excellent tech editor. So I wanted to shout out a little bit my tech editor, Madeline Windsor. You can find her as Kingfisher Knits on the internet and on Instagram. She posts beautiful projects that she's working on. And Madeline's really like the right tech editor for me. She questions everything, which is great because I have a tendency to, fast and loose, sort of move too quickly through things. So even things that seem obvious, she'll ask me questions about, and then it makes me sort of slow down and rethink them and make sure that I am right. If I'm right, I'd say like 1 in 9 times I'm right. The other 8 times she's right. There's an issue. But even then, it's good because it means that I take the time to go through it and really say like, oh, why did I put that in? Why did I think that was the right way to do it? So I think having Madeline's guidance has really, really helped me. And she does sort of say things like, do we need this? Is this necessary? Couldn't you just say this? Which is really great. And it's interesting because it reminds me, working with a tech editor, working with Madeline, a little bit of my days writing for magazines. So I used to write like little short blurbs, occasional features when I was lucky, for Elle Canada and Canadian Living and a few different magazines. And I remember like, I thought an editor, if they wanted to change something, would just change it. But they don't really. They send it back to you to solve. So my favorite note would always be awk, A-W-K, which obviously is short for awkward, but when you read it, it would just say awk, awk, which is sort of a great sound for awkward. So it would be like basically noting that there was a paragraph or not paragraph, a sentence or word choice that the editor felt was awkward, but there was no suggestion of how to fix it. It was basically like saying, back to you, ball's in your court, this doesn't work, find something that works better. And I remember occasionally being frustrated by that, sort of thinking, well, what is it that whatever it is you want to say, you're paying me, you tell me what you want me to say, and I'll say it. You can tell I wasn't really a journalist, I was more of a writer. But what it does is it sort of forces you to go back and rethink your intentions, rethink what you're trying to communicate, and find a better way. And I feel like working with Madeline has done that for me as a pattern writer and has made me think about that. And in some ways, it has even influenced what I've chosen to design, because I'm thinking about some of these questions that she asks me or discussions we get into, and it makes me think, wow, well, could I design something that sort of answers that question? And I love that, because I feel like one way to stay inspired as a designer is to think of it as problem solving. Like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? I've said that the problem I was trying to solve with Galore when I designed it is that I had these 5 amazing skeins originally of the Madeline Tosh DK, and none of them could I get a second skein of. Like, they were all one-offs that were sort of the last skeins in a shipment, and we weren't going to get those colors again. So, Galore came from trying to solve the problem of how can I make these 5 skeins into one garment. Problem solving is like a really nice way to stay inspired. So that's my shout out to Madeline Windsor, Kingfisher Knits. Go follow her, and if you're looking for a great tech editor, I definitely recommend her. So part of why I wanted to talk about that is I wanted to talk about how you read a knitting pattern. At one point I had tried to do like a workshop at Espace Tricot with this as a title, Read a Knitting Pattern Like a Pro, but nobody wanted to take it. And I know it doesn't, because it doesn't sound very sexy, does it? But I think, being in an LYS and helping customers with their knitting issues, I realized that this is a skill that you develop over time. It's really, really useful and cuts down on errors, cuts down on getting halfway into a pattern and realizing you don't like it, or that you don't have the right materials or the right skills. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about how I read a knitting pattern when I'm considering knitting something. So that brings me to, here I'm just going to move Galore out of the way, the Nightingale sweater by Norah Gaughan, which is the cover sweater here on the latest issue of Pom Pom magazine. So I picked up the magazine when I was in Rhinebeck at the New York Sheep and Wool Festival, and I knew right away that this was the one. I love this. I think it's gorgeous, and I'd always wanted to knit a Norah Gaughan garment, and I had just never really selected which one, and I thought, this is it. I'm doing this one. So I actually have the back finished and blocked because I got so excited. I was like, I need to see it blocked. I used the Quince & Co. Lark that was called for in the pattern, and I used the color Aigrette because I am someone who really wants everyone to see my hard work. Like, I like that. I like when people are like, oh my God, you did that? So I wanted a nice light color so these beautiful cables would pop out and you'd see them. So, before I cast this on though, I spent quite a bit of time with the pattern. I'm gonna do my flashes up really quick because I don't want anyone pausing and learning the pattern from this. Not that I think anybody would. I mean, you'd be crazy to try. So one of the first things I see when I open the pattern is this. This is a list of all of the stitches. Holy moly, right? Like, that's pretty intimidating and kind of scary. There are 3 columns of definitions of different cable stitches. So I look at that, and of course my eyes cross. When someone says to you, you need to read the pattern all the way through, right? How many times have you heard that? Either from, it's written at the top of the pattern, or, someone at your LYS says to you, you need to read it the whole way through. What does that really mean? Nobody is suggesting that you need to read through every single one of these cable definitions and read it like a novel. Oh my God, that would never happen. But, I glanced at them and tried to see, like, do any of these not sort of make sense to me? That's what I'm looking for when I go through the abbreviation section of a pattern. Is like, there anything here that's totally unfamiliar, that I've never seen that abbreviation, or I don't know that technique? And in this case, no, these are all basic cables. And in this case, too, there's a really nice chart that also has all, everything here. And it's a super visual chart. I think Andrea from Fruity Knitting is knitting this as well, and she talked about how strikingly visual this chart is. I mean, it's really obvious just from looking at it what it is you're going to do with your stitches, what direction they're going to move, whether it's pearls in the background or knits. So you don't really ever have to refer back to this ever again. So why is it there? Because it has to be. You cannot really publish a knitting pattern that doesn't define your terms. So this information is here in this pattern. It's absolutely got to be here in this pattern, and you don't really need to look at it. And that's one of the things that you're figuring out when you read a knitting pattern before you start knitting. It's like, do I need this? Do I need to look at it again? The other thing I find really helpful is to go through a pattern and just find the headers. Anything that's in bold, anything that's big, that starts at a new section. If I see a return in the pattern, that's somewhere I'm going to look and go, oh, what does that mean? Okay, so like, for example, one of them here is pattern begins. Great, awesome, now I know where the pattern starts. Everything that came before this was other information. It's not required for the actual knitting of the pattern. Here there's also breakdowns of sizes. So size 2 and 3 only do one thing, size 4 does another thing. So again, like, I'm just going to have a quick look at that and make sure that I understand how that's being formatted so that I don't miss it when I'm actually knitting. The other thing that you'll find often is, sleeves, body. Those will be big, and then they'll be like front, back, variations. These are the things you need to do. Finishing. You're looking for those headers, and then you want to do a quick scan of what's under that information. Now, I'm assuming that the pattern's well written and that the headers are right. If you're looking at a pattern that doesn't have headers, doesn't have a breakdown of what the different sections are, you should go through and find them yourself. That's what I would do. I would look through it and say, like, where is the sleeve? And then I would like write it in myself or highlight it. This is the sleeve. This is the waist shaping. Because you really want to be able to understand the flow of the pattern. And all of this is going to make it so much easier when you actually cast on to sort of know what you're about to do. And that's something that's really come with time, that I've learned with time. I mean, I used to be definitely someone who would buy a pattern, buy yarn, cast it on before I'd even look to the second page. And that way madness lies, because that's when you get halfway through it and then go, oh God, like I needed other needles, or I don't know how to do this, and I don't have anyone to ask, or I'm on vacation, I'm away, and I don't have my technique books, I have no way to reference this. Now we have the internet, but when I started, we didn't. So that's something that is really useful. The other thing that I think is really important is to read through the materials list. What is this pattern asking you to have on hand in the way of needles, in the way of notions like stitch markers? Does it say how many stitch markers you need? Do they need to look different from each other? Often, even I try to think about that. I often will say how many stitch markers I want you to have, and if I really am calling for you to have 2 different colors, something like that, I will say so in my materials list, but not everybody will. So part of that initial read is trying to match those materials to the different sections in the pattern, because you might find that you don't need them because you're going to skip that section, or you may find that I think I'm going to need more stitch markers than that because I plan to put stitch markers in between every repeat of my lace pattern, or something like that. But knowing that before you cast on is going to help you succeed. So this is a big one, the needles that are listed, right? But the needles always say, if it's a pattern, right, they're worth their salt, or needles to get gauge. So say you're like packing up to travel with a pattern that you haven't really swatched for or done your reading for. You're like, oh great, it calls for a 4 and a 4.5 millimeter. I'm going to put those in my bag and off I go. And then you get going and you realize actually for you it's going to be a 3.5 and a 4. So everything that's in that list of these needles, whether that's like DPNs for finishing the cuff, or go down a needle size for the rib, if you don't know that, if you haven't figured that out, you're going to end up with the wrong materials. So matching that is really important. And then that's also a really great way to catch mistakes, right? Often in that materials list, it'll tell you what needle size, but not the cord length, or not what kind of needles. One of the things that we all like to do is, because it's easiest to say, your preferred needles for small circumference knitting. So you kind of have to know what that's going to be, like looking at the pattern. Are you going to use DPNs? Are you going to use magic glue? Are you knitting a size where you could get away with putting it on a 16-inch needle all the way, or maybe you like 9 and 12-inch needles? So by making that match of like, oh, here she's calling for this needle, but what part of the pattern is it for? Is my 24-inch circular going to do it, or am I going to need extra needles? So that's something I actually do now. So this should give you a sense of how long I sit with a pattern before I cast it on. It's often like a month. Where I'll sort of come back to it and browse through it. The way I do with cookbooks, I think a lot of people do this, where it's like before you try that new recipe in the cookbook, you kind of leaf to that page and you have a look and you're like, oh, do I have any star anise in my house? I guess next time I'm out, maybe I'll pick some up and slowly build up the ingredients I need. And by then you will have read it 3 or 4 times, or at least glanced at it a bunch of times. And it puts you sort of in a better mode of preparation to be able to actually accomplish it when you get started. You know, kind of like how long it's going to take you and all that. So that's my advice for reading a knitting pattern. I think it sets you up for success. And I think about that when I'm writing patterns too. Like, how do I break this down in a way that's going to make it really easy for people to have a look through really fast and have the most success possible. So there you go. I'm really hoping to get back to finishing this up really soon. But of course, I have a bunch of design stuff on the needles, as always. Secret knitting. I have a pattern coming up really soon, probably in the next couple of weeks. There's hints of it all over my social media, but I'm at that weird phase of it where I'm like, it's in testing and I want to keep it secret so I can like do the big reveal. But honestly, if you looked at my Instagram, you probably already know what pattern I'm talking about. And then I have another pattern already in tech edit from after that, so I feel like I'm a little bit like on fire. I have a third design on my needles. It's sweater weather. It's exciting. This is my time. Okay, so what else am I going to do? I'm going to show you, oh yeah, what I'm wearing. What I'm wearing, it's a segment on the show. I'm wearing my Comfort Fade Cardi by Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits. I knit this about a year ago. I wear it all the time. It's knit in Artfil Americana DK in 4 colors. I'm trying to remember. I think it's Cape Verde, Confetti, Ikebana, and actually my last green, this green is Grasshopper from Madeline Tosh. So I mixed my brands for this. And I actually knit this sweater twice, because after I knit this one, I knit a sample for Espace Tricot, and then I taught a class on it. So I know this pattern pretty well. And here's the issue with mine. This is a gauge issue. So I got gauge on the body, no problem. And then I followed, the directions to go down a needle size for the collar, which is knit in garter. And the truth is, what I've learned about myself as a knitter since I did this is that my garter gauge is really, really loose. If you're somebody who's looked at my La Peregrina pattern, you know this, because my garter gauge is crazy. Some people have had to go up like 6 needle sizes to get my garter gauge. So my collar is super floppy and doesn't really have the shape that the pattern calls for. Like it doesn't sit properly when I try to like flip it over the way it's modeled in the pictures. If it wants to be, it's sort of big. So how I wear it is I belt it. And I do this. Boop, boop, boop. And I really like it. I sort of have fantasies that one day I'm going to rip this collar out and redo it at the proper gauge. And I even bought some really pretty vintage buttons that kind of match that I thought I might do a button band. And so I could because I actually really like wearing it sort of like this under a coat. And it's really nice. But I don't know if that's ever going to happen. It is super cozy and comfortable, and it's perfect for today, which is -17 here in Montreal. So yeah, my only modification of this is that I knit my sleeves flat. It's something I do a lot when I've got color changes in the round and a small circumference, because I find that that's something that I'm not great with my finishing. There's some details on this that I prefer you not see. So yeah, but other than that, when I shortened the cuff, I found that I have shorter arms, I think, so I shortened the cuff by, I don't remember exactly what I did, but I just cut some of the fade rows out and went for it. So you go, that's my Comfort Fade Cardi. I think all my notes are up on Ravelry if you want to check them out, but it's basically exactly what I just said. And then, oh yeah, so stuff that's on my needles and things that I've made since my last podcast. So I had this like total maker's high that I went on for December. I had some gifts to knit, but I also had some like little whips of my own that I was finishing up. And have you ever felt, like, that feeling that I think other people get from sports, like after they play a game or something, or they run, they're like, oh, I feel amazing. I feel so good. I think I've discovered how I get that feeling, and it's by finishing knits or any kind of product, making something. And if I can like stack a whole bunch of like, this is finished, right on top of each other, I get like this sort of endorphin rush and I feel like Superwoman. So I had that feeling over the holidays. I made a whole bunch of hats. So, hats. First of all, I designed a hat. This is the orbital hat. Looks like this. It's a little slouchy beret. Knit in La Bien-Aimée. These are the leftovers I had after I finished my Straylight. And it uses the same stitch pattern as Straylight, this really pretty Estonian star stitch with a little garter brim that I did a little tiny fade on, although you don't have to. And this is actually a free pattern. You can get it by subscribing to my newsletter. So that's sort of something I had as a goal for a while, was like start a newsletter. I find I'm really responsive to designer newsletters when I get them and there's like a little sale or a new pattern. I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna go check it out. So it's like I should get going on that. And I thought a really nice way to sort of thank people for signing up, for being early adopters, is to give them something for free. So this is a super easy, fun, very fast, because it's a loose gauge, sort of slouchy beret that's totally inappropriate for February in Montreal, but it was really nice in like October, November. So that's orbital. Bam. Next. My daughter asked me to knit her a sweater in all the colors. I was like, what color do you want? All the colors. I was like, ooh, okay. And then I found the perfect pattern for that, which is Christmas in July by Tanis Lavallee of Tanis Fiber Arts. So this is the yoke and the beginning of the body and sleeves for Veronica's Christmas in July. Get this up here so you can see the beautiful color work. This is a whole bunch of scraps of different things. There's some Sweet Georgia in here from her prismatic sets. There's some Tanis Fiber Arts in here. There's a little bit of Artful Bell in here. And then the body is Lang 150 right here. And that color, I have to say, it's not what I would have chosen, but it is what my daughter chose, and I think she will love it. But I'm so obsessed with this yoke. I mean, it was so much fun to knit, and it's just so beautiful that once I got to like the boring stockinette part, which we all know is my downfall, I was like, I need more. I need to do more of that. So then I took more leftovers and knit her a hat. So I based it on the chart from the sweater. I just sort of improv'd around it because there's no increases in this, whereas there are in the yoke sweater. And this is her little guy, which is sort of the same scraps and Artful Bell in White Sands as the top. So I finished that and gave it to her. And the reason she's not wearing it today, again, is because it's minus 17 today, so there's no fingering weight hats happening. And I was like, well, damn, I want one of those. So I knit one for me. So this is my Christmas in July hat. And I did it a little bit more of a slouchy. I really like. It's not my usual thing, a slouchy, but honestly, it came from like maybe knitting too much up here and having some gauge issues where my color worked quite a bit tighter than the rest here. And I was like, whatever, it's like for fun. And I ended up really, really liking it. That's my Christmas in July hat. Right? Like, can you feel the high? I feel it. And then I also knit this beautiful hat pattern. It is called the Tremblant Toque. It's by Diana Walla, and it's part of the Chalet collection for Espace Tricot. And I was lucky enough to get a little preview of this before it was released because I took a colorwork class with Diana at the store, and this is the project that we did. So my gauge was quite loose, so I realized that very quickly this was going to be a gift for my husband, and he calls it his fancy hat. Isn't that sweet? Because usually he just wears like the most beat up, sort of ugly ribbed toques, store-bought, because he's a biker. He bikes to work all the time, so he's constantly sort of ruining his outdoor wear. So this is fancy hat. There is actually a knit-along going on for the Chalet collection right now in the Espace Tricot Ravelry group. Diana is all over that, and you should definitely check out the patterns from that collection. They're really beautiful, and this was super fun to knit. This is the Rauma 2-ply. 2-ply? Rauma Final. That's what it's called. Rauma Final. So yeah, like 4 hats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 hats in like a month. Plus, I did a whole bunch of sewing. So that one thing about sewing, man, it's a quick hit. I'm not a great sewist. I have issues with zippers and the finishing. I think I've gotten so used to knitting with its elasticity that allows you to kind of be loosey-goosey. That sewing isn't always a thrill, but I did a whole bunch of sewing. I sewed bags for my mom. I sewed some bags for Diana as a gift. So that was really exciting in the sense of like being like, bang, 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 they're out. But the cool thing that I did, and I posted some of this on Instagram, which is that I really wanted to sew myself a new needle case because I have so many interchangeable needles now that like the store-bought ones weren't enough. So this is it. I used some wool that I got at Rhinebeck. Unfortunately, this wool, basically you look at it and it has dog hair on it. So I think I need to give it like a spray with some Scotch Guard or something to try and protect it. I used a little bit of leather here to finish it off. I'll show you how it looks inside. So I just had some quilting cotton that I used and some leather that I had some like scrap leather from a project from years ago. And it has little magnetic guys here to hold this part up. And I stole those from my Addy case, which I destroyed in order to make this. Has a little pocket here with some snaps. Now, that's because I hate zippers and I'm really bad at them, and I didn't want to ruin it by putting in a zipper and having it look bad. So I just used these snaps. But the really cool thing is that what happens with the leather is that the needles stay in. Look at this. Upside down, no slippage. So that makes me super happy. To the point where like I want to improve on it a little bit, the pattern, and I'm going to make a couple more. I'm going to make one for a friend of mine, and I'm going to make myself a second one, maybe in a fabric that doesn't have half of a dog on it, just from being in the same house with my dog Boo. So yeah, it was like, it felt good to get all that stuff going, and now I'm sort of back. It's 2019. It's time to get back to work as a designer, and let me see. That's it. That's all I wanted to say. So you'll notice I did not show you my sepia sweater. That's because nothing has happened with that whatsoever. But I think now that Galore is off the needles and in play, I'll be getting back to that really soon because I want my 100 centimeter cord that's been in it for like 8 months. I need it. I need it for other designs and other work. So I need to get it back. And I'm like 2 inches from doing that. So hopefully next episode I will have that for you. Trying to think of anything else to let you know. I'm doing a lot of teaching at Espace Tricot this sort of winter semester. So if you're in Montreal, have a look. I'm teaching like a Knitting 102 class, so sort of taking you beyond the basics. I'm teaching Diana Wallace Stoneham Poncho as a project class. I'm super excited about that. I'm doing a sweater structure workshop with my colleague Naomi Endicott of Humble Montreal. She's a beautiful line of hand-dyed yarn. You should check her out. And what else am I teaching? Oh, and a Ravelry workshop, which is on Monday. So probably I don't even know if I'll get this episode up before that happens. But I'm super excited about that too. It's good. Things are happening. I feel like 2019, this is it. This is my year. Really want to do more teaching, more trunk shows, get out there and actually interact with people. So anyway, thanks for watching Fast and Loose. I'm Stephanie Erb. I'll flash up where to find me. Definitely, if you like the orbital hat and you're interested, sign up for my newsletter. I would super appreciate it, and I will be emailing out soon. I'd say in another week or two with a new pattern. And that's the only time I email, like only when I have real news. I am too lazy to put together newsletters unless I have real news. Okay, well, thanks again. I'm Stephanie. See you soon.